He and his collaborators have published widely about dog research, but his favourite publication is his recently re-released book Fishing Dogs, a humorous look at dogs, fishermen and professors. Today he's here to present aggression, not a unitary behaviour. Please, let's give a warm welcome to Ray.
I can't see you, and that's a terrible way to give a lecture. I approach animal behavior just slightly different than Patricia. I divided the animal behavior world up here in three parts. And you're going to hear speakers from each of the different disciplines as we go along. Let's see how I do the laser. All right, animal behavior, a general subject, and it's divided up. If you go onto a college campus, you know, they have the comparative psychologists. They have a building on the other side of campus. We never go over there. Sometimes we see them at Christmas parties or whatever, but don't read their stuff or whatever. And they're interested in, a lot of that, what they're interested in is the development of behavior, the learning, modifying the behavior in some ways. And then you're going to hear a neurobiologist who actually goes in there and studies what's going on in the nervous system or whatever. And I'm way down here in something called ethology, and I'm over in the biology department. All right, so I'm looking at behavior from an evolutionary point of view. I think that all those behaviors, those snarls and growls and everything else, are genetic. And I'd love to be able to, if I could see you and know whether you're going to be totally shocked or not, I'd love you to just think about behavior during this lecture from my point of view, which is, by the way, I don't think dogs are conscious. All right? So in other words, it's sometimes when I'm going to school in the morning, you know, I drive to school. It takes me a half an hour. And I'm worried because I haven't prepared my lecture well enough. And so I'm all the way in there. I say, well, what's going to be the first sentence? What am I going to say? And so forth. And all of a sudden, I arrive on campus. And I have about 3 or 4 different ways I can go to campus. And I don't remember which way I went. All right. Now, I must have made some right decisions along the way, even though I don't remember what they are. So when I cross Route 9, if the light was red, somewhere I've got to cross Route 9. And I've got to make the correct decision there, or I'm going to die. All right. But I don't remember what it was. So I think that's my definition of consciousness. I did that whole thing unconsciously. All right, so let's see how I do this. Anyway, I'm an ethologist and I'm a biologist, and I believe behavior is a taxonomic character of the animal. They inherited those behaviors and so on. So here we have a definition of a motor pattern. Ethology is the study of motor patterns. Motor patterns are a genetic part of the behavior, my interpretation. And it's through the production of an integrated sequence of movements that an animal expresses rules. All right? There's rules in there, and I'll show you tomorrow that they're actually embedded right into the nervous system. All right? So if some breeds of dogs, when we talk about it, are going to have some rules and not others. All right, so here's an animal. Now, I don't think this animal, this is a wolf, and I don't think this animal's conscious at all. I don't think he knows what he's doing. I don't think he's trying to do anything. He's in a particular environment, and he's expressing a set of rules that is coming out of the central nervous system. All right? So those rules are a taxonomic characteristic of the animal, just like, you know, 5 fingers on my hand. You know, you can talk about how they developed and what they can do and develop, and you always recognize it as a hand. But as a matter of fact, It's a set of rules that are built into the human being that produces the 5 fingers most of the time. All right. Now, as a scientist, I have to measure something. So I assume that behavior has evolved. And what that means is that it has to be in one of 3 categories. All right. I measure the quality or the shape of the animal. All right, so you say, well, you take your dogs to a dog show and you hold them out there and you say, this is the dog shape. Well, by the way, this is a wolf shape. And that's one of the shapes. That's a motor pattern. They're expressing a set of rules that are built in. And what I want to know, sometimes the difference between 2 species is not just what the rules are, what the shape is, all right, but the number of times that the animal expresses it during its life. And so, you know, dogs, and they bark, and we're going to have a lecture on barking in dogs and so on, and they sit out there, and the frequency of them barking is very, very much higher than something like the wolf or the coyote. That's a difference. So dogs can howl, and they do howl, but they do it at a different frequency, a different timing than wolves do. And lastly, it's the sequence. There's an environment where the animal expresses the rules. And I'd love to talk about that forever. But the fact is that here is a wolf, and he's in what we call an eye stalk behavior. You saw it a few minutes ago in a border collie. Same set of rules. All right? Same shape, whatever. All right, now, take those motor patterns, integrated sequence of motion that expresses rules. You take that, and you have to put them, as a biologist, into 3 groups. All right? There's foraging motor patterns. By the way, if you're a Darwinian biologist, if you believe in Darwin, and so on, these are the only places that you can select for anything, behavior. It has to be either foraging behavior, or it's reproductive behavior. All right, so there's a wolf, and the wolf in this case is doing a behavior that we call a 4-foot stab, where it leaps up in the air and it stabs a prey. And I can just show you that same behavior in coyotes and jackals, and in some breeds of dogs. All right, the next one is reproductive motor patterns and so on. And again, as I watch these wolves mating, I see an awful lot of the same motor patterns that I see in coyotes, that I see in jackals, that I see in dogs, all right, especially if they have tails. And the third is the hazard avoidance behaviors. And here all of a sudden is, you look at the dog and you say, aha, the dog is fearful, it's anxious, it's going to avoid some hazard. And so it takes on specific postures when it sees hazards, and we'll do some more of that. All right, so now they ask me to talk about aggression. I say, all right, fine. I've got to put aggression in one of those patterns. It either has to be foraging aggression, protecting food or feeding territories, has to be reproductive aggression, in other words, protecting mates or reproductive territories, and the hazard avoidance, it has to protect itself. So here's a wolf doing one of the most aggressive behaviors you ever saw in your life. I mean, this is a female, and she's doing, she's urinating, but she's raising her leg the way a male would, and she's pissing on this pumpkin, all right, which is, it's claiming it. All right, does she know what she's doing? Goodness, no. You know, it's a signal. She recognizes it as food, and she claims it as food. If you go and you challenge that and pick up the pumpkin, you'll get bit. All right, reproductive motor patterns, protecting mates, whatever. We've seen some nice pictures earlier today and so forth, where all of a sudden there's this signaling going back and forth, and it has to do with reproduction. And finally, you know, this is what they call the gape. and it's a fear posture or so on. The animal gets totally defensive or whatever. And if you go anywhere near that animal, you're going to get badly bitten. All right. Now, I want to do just one other thing here. We go back to the original model, and we've got the comparative psychologists, the neurobiologists, and you've got the ethologists. Well, I'm sorry to say, but ethologists are kind of disappearing. There's only about 2 of us left, Patricia and I. And because most of the ethologists have evolved into something called behavioral ecologists. So if I went to, say, Yellowstone Park and looked at the wolf population, studied the behavior of the population up there, I would be a behavioral ecologist. And what I would assume as a behavioral ecologist about behavior is that it's the benefit of the behavior divided by the cost of it. All right, let me show you. I could do this, I could measure this in calories. I say the benefit in calories. I go out there, and the wolf goes out there, and he chases a moose. And so he has to put a certain amount of energy into chasing the moose. And then he catches the moose. First of all, you got to look for the moose, and he can spend days looking for a moose. And that takes a lot of calories. You know, I think a wolf, a basic metabolic rate on a wolf is something like 3,500 calories a day. All right, so that's an expense I have to pay back. And I have to pay it back by catching a moose. So I chase the moose, and that has another expense of calories as I chase the moose. And then I have to kill the moose, and so there's an acquisition cost. And with that acquisition cost, I can get hurt. And then I got a repair cost somewhere along the line. Well, there has to be enough calories in the moose to pay that whole bill back. That's what a behavioral ecologist does. All right, so the Darwinian model, all right, is the benefit. For most animals, the benefit of moving is never worth the cost. And so most animals out there in the world starve to death. All right, that's the natural selection equation. Those animals that can go out there and behave in such a way that the benefit is more than the cost are the ones that are going to be selected for. And those that are, like most animals, there's not enough food out there in the world to feed them. They're not good enough or behave in a system where they're going to do it. Most animals are going to starve to death. So if you go up and you look at the wolves on Isle Royale and you follow them over a period of time, you know, years, that study's been going on for 20 years or more, and so on. And most of those wolves die of starvation somewhere along the line. The reason populations stay the same in an area is that there's only enough energy in that area to feed some number of wolves who have to behave in this, you know, with the transportation, with the cost of killing, and so forth. Follow it? All right, so if I'm looking at something like aggressive behavior, the behavior has to be paid for in some way. So if the animal's going to be aggressive, he's going to use up a lot of energy, a lot of calories. And so it's got to be worth it in some ways. It's got to pay back. Now, the problem that you people have for dogs is that you don't have them out there in some kind of a natural environment. You think dogs are pets or they're working dogs or whatever else. And you're willing to pay for the benefits that you get. So if I have a border collie out there, I did this with, I'll talk to you more about it next time, but if I'm out there and I'm running a border collie, and you know, the basic cost of a 30-pound animal is, you know, 1,000 calories a day, and all of a sudden I begin to work it, and so all of a sudden the cost goes up. Anyway, I'll try to illustrate that with dog-dog behavior. Here's a scene in Venezuela, and this nice lady is cleaning the cow guts. There's a rumen, and she's got a bunch of cow guts there, and she's going to clean them all out, and she's going to make sausage. and out of them. All right, so there's two dogs, and there's this guy here that's sitting right behind her. Every once in a while, she takes it and she throws something over her shoulder. All right, now who's going to get it? This one or that one? Most likely this one, unless she throws it a long way. This dog's going to get it. So why doesn't this dog move down into that area? And the answer is that this dog here is threatening him. Boy, if that isn't a Class A threat with that dog sitting there. And you can see that dog realizes it. Its ears back, it's not doing the direct eye contact, whatever. All right, so the situation now intensifies a little bit, you know, this guy. And look over here, all of a sudden, it's the look, you know. And so this guy looks back. And so basically, those two dogs, the one is guarding the resource. She's got the benefit down here. And if he can get up close to the benefit and hold everybody else off, he can get the benefit and deny the other dogs that. Fair enough? I forgot what I... All right, this is a nice old painting by a guy by the name of Snyder. Hangs in a museum in Europe and whatever. And so in this particular case, are they arguing over food or are they arguing over location? So, I'm sorry. If you take this is a picture that Catherine took in a guide dog kennel. And the people in this particular guide dog kennel were having trouble with their adult dogs with something that they called dog diversion. What do they call it? The dogs are growing up here, and they're very conscious of what other dogs are doing. All right, so if you look, they're not feeding. There's food. Oops, sorry. There's food all over the floor. There's food everywhere. There's enough food for everybody. But what's happening is this dog up here is defending the space. They're full. They're not fighting over food. They're defending the space, the location. And dogs are very interesting that way because I remember one time Dave Berry in his column, he's the columnist in Florida, and he was telling about his two dogs. And every day he lets the two dogs in the back door. And the dogs roar in and roar around and roar to the kitchen and go exactly to the spot where they dropped the turkey 2 Thanksgivings ago. All right? And so that's one of the things that I find with, as I travel around and I look at, say, my village dogs out there in the world. You got to realize that most dogs in the world are not like your dogs. Your dogs are a very, very small percentage of the dogs in the world. I think I wrote it somewhere recently that there are pretty close to 1 billion dogs out there in the world. And and of that 1 billion dogs, 85% of them are not under human reproductive control. All right, so they're out there and they're living lives like any other animal, like rats or whatever, any other animal. They're out there, they're competing with each other. You know, they have an enormous mortality rate, especially in the juvenile period. All right, so what they do is if the resource is collected somewhere, like the turkey on the floor, they will defend that spot for years. All right? So what these puppies are doing here is they're defending the pan. That puppy there isn't feeding at all. But the tails are up and so on. There's a tremendous aggression going on between these dogs. And what happens in that case is that as the dog grows up and finally goes to guide dog school, where they learn it, you'll be going along and all of a sudden the dog will turn and go over and sniff some other dog. They become dog attentive. And they do it in this period right here. If I didn't want dogs growing up to show those kinds of behaviors, I'd feed them separately when they're puppies this age. I would do it. Let's see, why doesn't it work? Come on. Oh, wrong button. I'll never figure it out. Here is the Mexico City dump. It's one of my favorite places to study dogs. There are 750 dogs per square kilometer in the Mexico City dump. And there is no fighting over food at all. The food is distributed all over that dump, you know, in just a huge area. And so there's no real, the trick is the transportation cost to find the food. But you don't want to spend any money defending that food because there's so much of it. Let's see, here's another case. These dogs never fight over food. They're out there, they don't even protect the food from scavengers like the pigeons there and so on. If you watch wolves out there on a carcass, on a wolf carcass, they have to defend that carcass from coyotes and ravens and other kinds of scavengers that come in and to feed off the tiger. So it's worth it for them to defend it. By the way, they don't do a very good job and they lose it most of the time. They get a big full belly, they eat themselves 5 pounds of moose or something like that, and they go and lie down and fall asleep, and all the little scavengers come in and they get the rest. So the wolves actually have to kill more moose or whatever the prey is, and not try to spend the energy defending against the scavengers. That make sense? I can. All right. We're still in the Mexico City dump, though. And there are certain resources in the Mexico City dump that are scarce, and one is water. And so you find the animals not fighting over food, but you find them being aggressive over water. So here's an animal, and he's defending the water against this other one that's turned away. And so around water, you get a very different aspect of aggressive behavior than you do around food. The other big one in the dump was shade. And so what you have is dogs. There's only so much room under one of those carts and so forth. And the dogs that are there will defend it against others. Here's a dog that got his head under a carton. But this guy here, just look at that dog's being threatened right now. And what happens is, I didn't get the picture, but this other dog came up and drove him out of there, took the shade away from him. So here's a resource, and a valuable resource, that's worth defending. It's worth showing some aggression over it, where food is not. All right. The other aspect of this is that here are 7 or 8 big male dogs all eating out of the same trough together. No fights, no aggression, nothing, not a growl among them. And what's going on here? Why don't they fight over it? And the answer is that the quality of it is so poor that it isn't worth fighting over it. In other words, there's not enough calories, not enough energy in the food to even defend it. And this is true in lots of the animal world. I love it with, with hummingbirds. I had a student one time that did an experiment on hummingbirds where you have a hummingbird feeder and it has sugar water in it. And what you could do is, he had a tube running to it, and he could change the concentration of sugar in the solution. And all of a sudden, the concentration of the sugar in the solution would get up to some point, and then some big old buck hummingbird starts to defend it against other hummingbirds. In other words, it became worth it to defend it. Before that, it doesn't. So this is what is happening. These guys, this is Italy, and these guys are up there, and they're running a milk business. They've got sheep and goats. And what they do is, after they make the cheese, they dump what's left, the whey, into these troughs for their dogs, their livestock guarding dogs, to guard. And they all just eat it. The quality isn't there to defend it. So after the hummingbird experiments and after this experience, and I who love design kennels, this was my kennel, my office, my classroom, and so forth. I had it all gorgeous. It was utopia. But I was raising dogs for a project that we were doing. We were doing a livestock guarding dog project. And I thought that every once in a while I have to double up in the kennels. I just run out of space. I leave that sentence somewhere. I had this project where we would teach farmers how to use livestock guarding dogs. And so I would put them out there and raise the puppies in the kennel and then go out and give it to a farmer, teach them how to use it. And we were putting out, I don't know, 100 to 200 puppies a year. Now, you get crowded, all right? You've got a female in there with a litter of puppies, and she's got to have a kennel. And so finally, I get kennels where I'm crowded. And one of the things that you always have, if you go and you look at the kennels and the dog food companies or whatever, you'll find that they'll double dogs up, and one dog is always threatening the other. They start fighting over food, they start fighting over whatever, or just space, or just location, or whatever else. And I've gone in and said to these people in dog food companies that are doing experiments and having the dogs there to test their taste or whatever else, is that, you know, this is a bad scene because you got one dog back there that's being constantly threatened by the other. You know, there's a nervous anxiety that goes up in it. So what do I do when I have to put 4 or 5 dogs in a kennel? I reduce the quality of the food. All right? There was a nice little trick to it, was that I started feeding my dogs in the kennel pig pellets. Now, a pig is a simple stomached animal. It's just like a dog or a human being and so forth. It needs all the same kinds of things. All right, so pig pellets are perfectly good dog food. The only problem with pig pellets is the dogs don't like them. All right, so you put it in there, and they'll eat it. And I've raised puppies on it, and I can show you that the growth rate on the puppies and so on is exactly the same on pig pellets as it is on Purina puppy chow or whatever. And it's the same, except they don't like it. And so what they're doing in the kennels, we'd go and you'd be up in the office and you could listen, you could hear the hopper door going all day long in the pig pellet pens, and not at all in the puppy chow. Now what's happening here is the dogs in the pig pellet thing, they go, they take a couple of bites of it, I don't like it, and they go and they sit down. And then they're hungry, so they go back and they take a couple more and they go sit down. They go back and take a couple more. Where the ones in the puppy chow gorge themselves and go to sleep. All right? And so that you get a totally different response given the quality of the food. Now, if I took this pen over here with these dogs in it, and who are on pig pellets, and I threw a steak in there, I'd have a dog fight. Or I'd have a terrible dog fight. All right, because all of a sudden I've upped the quality of the resource. All right, so that's foraging. The foraging behavior, they can defend the location, they can defend the resource itself, or they not, depending on what the quality and the distribution of the food is. Now, in this case, is this a pack of dogs? No. It's a female in heat, and it's all the males that are gathered around. Now, in the Mexico City dump, both males and females are promiscuous, and they're very polite about it. They'll line up, and you know, and everybody will have a chance at her. And from a dog point of view, that's from the female's point of view, that's a much better system than having a monogamous male. And why is it? Because you get more variation in the puppies, and therefore, with more variation, you have a better room for selection. If you get the wrong male and there's only one, you know, you're dead in the water. All those puppies are going to die. If you have some kind of distribution to them, they have a better, she has a better chance of getting her puppies into the next generation. So you sit there and you watch, and there's just this rich social life going on all over the dump. Everybody's in on reproduction. For the males, it's really great not to have just one male dominate the female. There's even a chance for one puppy. Most of these litters of puppies, theoretically, there can be as many fathers as there are puppies in the litter. I've never quite seen it. I've seen 3 or 4 males quite commonly. But anyway, the long and the short of it is there's a resource. It's a reasonably valuable resource, but it's not exactly worth fighting over. Now, I know I've got people out there in the audience who've been to other places in the world where they will fight over a female. They will fight over. With wolves, maybe you know or don't know, but the wolves, they talk about wolves being, or coyotes, pairing for life, and so on. It sounds so lovely and romantic. But the fact is, first of all, most wolves only live to be, average age is 4 years old. And once you reach adulthood, and they don't breed until your 2nd season. All right, so you basically have 3 years to reproduce yourself. And so what's happened to the wolves, which is very interesting, is that they're not bonded as a pair. What they are is they're both defending a territory. And it happens to be the same territory. The male defends that territory from other males, and the female defends the territory. What's valuable is the feeding territory. All right, so the female is guarding the territory for other females against other females, and the male against other males. So it makes it look like they're a pair out there, and when it comes to breeding, he's most likely to breed her. All right. But if they're hunting around the territory and she gets on the edge, other males will come in and breed her. All right, so it's not that he's defending her. She's not the resource. The feeding, the territory is the resource to be guarded. All right, so in this case, here at the Mexico City dump, it's always amazing, these dogs just have this wonderfully rich social life. They're well-fed. They're not well-watered or shaded, but they're well-fed. And look at them. Are they gorgeous? And interestingly enough, there's very little aggression. All right. This is one of those places that I was interested in aggression, because I found in running that livestock guarding dog project that we had very few bites where the dog actually bit a human being. But in half of them, well over half of them, there was the UPS guy shows up and the male bites him. And what's going on? There's a dog in heat in or around the area. And all of a sudden now he's defending that resource from the UPS guy. The UPS guy never sees it coming. I've had the experience myself where I never saw it coming. I was out working dogs up in Tabletop Mesa in Colorado. I was out there, I was working with a couple of dogs. I went out there, and boy, this male just all of a sudden turned loose on me, and he tore me up. He bit me through the stomach. I had to go to the hospital. I took it very well, by the way. So, all part of learning and growing up. The thing that saved me in this thing was I had my snuff can in my pocket. And when he came down and he grabbed me by the leg, the snuff can exploded in his mouth. And it brought him to a dead stop. Remember that, the fact is you can always turn off aggression with a can of snuff. And I have that can. It was, it's the Bible that caught the bullet for me, as far whatever. But anyway, that was one of those things where I didn't know what I'd done wrong, I was out there and all of a sudden this dog turns loose on me. And guess what? the other dog in the flock had come into heat. All right. The other big one is space. This is the whole idea of location. Here's a dog now that is being threatened by a guy with a camera, and he's coming up. The chickens aren't, by the way. I mean, the fact is these dogs live in these villages, and they've got chickens, and they've got goats, and they got no predatory behaviors in them at all, and so on. But all of a sudden, here comes a stranger up there. Now, it turns out what a stranger means is somebody that smells different. All right? We always think that the dog is looking at you and so on, but the dog isn't looking at you. Most of that kind of behavior comes from an olfactory. So if I went up in that village at night, you know, the dogs would tear you up. They'd tear you loose because you don't smell. I could never work in the Mexico City dump at night, so there's a periodicity in the day when you're likely to get bitten and when you're not likely to get bitten, and so on. So this is an African village, it's a South African village. And so I talk to the people there, and I say, well, can I come visit you tonight? And they say, no, no, the dogs will eat you. They'll tear you up. And it's true. We did a study in Ethiopia one time up in the Bale Mountains. And I'd sent one of my students up there to do this, to start the study. And she was good looking. She danced. She loved to go to parties and dance at night or something like that. So when I get the first batch of data back, I said, oh, here we go. There's no data at night. You know, what are you doing? And she said, are you kidding me? She said, you can't go outside at night. The dogs will kill you. And so lots of those people around those villages you say, why do you have these dogs? Well, they don't. As a matter of fact, it's the dog that adopts them rather than them adopting a dog. I've got one family I've got one dog down in South Africa, and he's scavenging off about 5 or 6 different houses in an area. And every person in every one of those houses think that's his dog. And they all have a name. That dog has 5 names as he goes around and so forth. Anyway, are they protecting, when I go in there at night, are they protecting food? Are they protecting themselves? Or are they protecting the location where there was food? And I don't know what that is, but boy, they can be ugly on you at night. All right, so in Ethiopia, we actually went and we did a study. And it's just very quickly, we found all kinds of interesting differences. For example, over there on your left is dogs in towns that are basically Muslim and towns that are basically Christian. And all of a sudden you can see that there's a very, very different, for example, the dogs out there in the Muslim villages, the blue one out there, you know, are mostly out on the street. You know, they're mostly, if you approach them, they bug off. There's very little aggression. But as you move into the Christian villages, you know, you find the dogs get more aggressive. Let's try another one. I can hardly see that one over there is my problem here. All right, the location of the dog by religion. And here's a Muslim town. By the way, most people realize that Muslims don't like dogs. And, but there's a lot of people who think that they actually kill the dogs. You know, they don't like them so much they're aggressive with the dogs. And that's not true. I've been in towns where the dog has been a problem, in Muslim towns where the dog has been a problem, and the dog has got a disease, you know, or whatever, and you say, why don't you just kill the dog? And they say, no, we can't do that. The dogs belong to God, you know, and God wanted it this way, and so that's the way they, so I find there's a very little aggressiveness towards dogs in those villages. But if you look at the difference, this one bugged me. There's 17% of the dogs in a Christian village were actually in the house. And where out there was 29% in the Muslim houses. Well, what is going on? And the answer was very simple, is those Muslim cultures, those shepherds or whatever, keep their sheep in the house. And the dog is coming into the house with the sheep or with the livestock, the goats or whatever. There's usually a room there that is especially for their... all right, so you can read that all right, right? Is that outside of the house on the street. And so in the Muslim villages, most of the dogs are not even in somebody's yard, but they're out on the street. Where it's very different is that most of the dogs in the Christian villages, and this is just up there in not Somalia, Ethiopia. If you look at, this is the one I should give to Catherine, is if you look at vocal responses, you know, whether the dog actually barks at you as a stranger or not. All right, if the dog is in the house, all right, it's a little bit more likely to bark at you. Whereas if they're in the street, they're not likely to bark at you at all, you know, and so on. So again, it depends on the location of where the dog is. It depends on what the dog is defending and why. All right, how about on the, we're looking at over here is aggressiveness. All right, dogs that are in the house are much more likely to show an aggressive response than those that are out in the street. Makes sense, right? It's whether the resource is worth defending or not is what is doing all this. And I can't see I'm sorry. This is just looking at the difference between young animals and adult animals, and you can see that, as a matter of fact, is that most of the aggression is coming from adults. Very little of it comes from yearling animals. Okay. All right. This is a wound that's almost totally healed up. All right. You should have seen it when it was open. This was my wife. We were in France. We were staying with some people, and they had 5 dogs, and those 5 dogs tore up my wife. Put her in the hospital. All right, what the hell's going on? We're invited guests in the house and this and that and the other. Somewhere along the line, she made the wrong move, unbeknownst to her, and the dogs ripped loose on her, and they tore her up, put her in the hospital. All right, the other thing that I find that aggression between dogs or between dogs and people comes with pain. This dog is, we had lots of dogs out in the range, and every once in a while one would get caught in a foot trap. You see he's caught in a foot trap here. And you'd go and you'd try to take the dog out of the foot trap, and you get bit. All right? There's, I had a dog in Germany one time that had arthritis or something like that. And the dog would be lying down, and you'd come into the room, and the dog would look up at you, and all of a sudden it would get that pain and sit there and growl at you. You caused the pain, and you never saw it coming. It's what they call deferred pain. So this is an interesting one. This is the one that I think Patricia was getting at. You see those 2 lower teeth there? That's a particular posture. What's going on there? It's aggressive. If you go in there, that dog will bite you. All right? And I noticed that one. Here's another dog. You see the 2 lower teeth sticking out there? And I was like, what's going on here? You know, and so on. As I go in, what is it about those 2 dogs? And the answer is they're chained. All right? And I was looking at some of your slides, and there was a difference between a dog that was on a leash and one that's not. And so what this dog is doing, is that a motor pattern? Is that part of the taxonomic character of the animal? No. It's what he is. He's in terrible conflict. He can't run away. He can't get at you. So the signals are just totally mixed up there. And he gives you, you know, the tail is down, the look at the back is up there, and so on, all of which are slightly indicative of fear. On the other hand, he's threatening you, and so on. And I see that a lot in dogs that are chained up or dogs that are in a situation where they can't leave. This is the kind of thing you see, for example, when you approach a wolf den. You get this kind of behavior. It's usually accompanied with barking, even in the wolf den. You know, the female is in conflict. She wants to run away from you. She wants to defend her pups. And they get into this kind of thing. So I find that there's another one. There's a dog that's, he's not chained, but he's out there and he's in a fenced area. He can't leave. He doesn't want to leave the sheep, whatever, but so anyway, it gives you that one posture down here. I think I have another one. This is a dog up in Portugal, was defending a flock of sheep. And I come up with my camera and take its picture and so on. And there it is, you know, the behavior. The dog is in conflict. He can't attack. He can't get away, really. Oh, there was another one in Puglia, a dog that was bonded to horses and was guarding the horses against me. All right, so these are signs of conflict. And so when you're looking at, say, aggressive behavior, you're looking at not only just the inherited motor pattern, the snarl, the growl, or whatever else, but you're looking at animals in areas where they've got conflicting signals coming in, and so they give you a conflicting response. By the way, you can get really bit on that. Now, I do the last one. I was told to cut this thing short because we were running late. And so I have to leave out a whole bunch of interesting things. But here's what you call an angry face. Now, what the hell's going on here? Is a dog, who's he giving the angry face to or whatever? And so later in the weekend, we'll hear from the neurophysiologist. But here, this is a neurophysiologist by the name of Panksepp. And he's got this dilemma. You're studying dogs. You got the dilemma where I've got a dog that's got a nice face, but thinking angry thoughts. All right. Or I got a dog that's thinking, has got an angry face, and he's thinking, hey, I'm just a heck of a nice dog. And so what's the conclusion? Well, Panksepp comes around and says, the only way we can solve the problem is that angry dogs have angry faces, have an angry face, and, you know, here I am, I'm angry. The problem with that, and it is a problem for people who are studying it. I look at the dog, and the dog's got an angry face, and I say, well, the dog is angry, you know, you try to read it. But as a matter of fact, is that an angry face? Would you go up there and stick your hand in his mouth? Well, it wouldn't do you any harm because he's playing. It's a play routine. And for lots of you dog trainers and so forth, you use that play routine to work on it. And the place that you see it the most is in military dogs. All right, here's a dog that will, if given the order, will kill you. All right, and you can say it doesn't look like an angry face or whatever, and it's not. The fact is these dogs are all trained using play routines on the dog, and so you're just conditioning a play routine until finally you get the dog to kill you. Well, that's what they do. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do when you're in the Army. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much.